For this one, it says the point -3, 5 in the terminal side of an angle in standard position. Determine the exact values of the 6 trig function values of that angle. Once again, I said that it's going to be broken up into two problems. Either you know the angle or you don't know the location of the angle. So first thing I would do is sketch this in standard position. Now the only thing is we don't have an angle, but we know that a point is on the terminal side on this angle. So just sketch -3, 5. Doesn't have to be to scale. We know that this point is going to be on this terminal side. Now once again, this angle is being rotated from the positive x-axis. So if we wanted to sketch this, this is the way theta would look like. Now the only thing here is you might want to use the reference angle, and that's how we're going to be finding the trigonometric functions of values of any trig or of any angle. To find the reference angle, again, go from the terminal side, go directly down to the horizontal axis, and create the 90 degree. Now, I know that this is going to be a triangle, but I usually associate the negative with direction. So I know in the triangle, the distance is always supposed to be positive, but that -3 is just simply indicating that it's 3 units in that direction. Okay. And this is 5 units up. Now, just based on this geometry, this is going to be my r. How can I calculate r? Yeah, Pythagorean theorem. I know that. Now, here's the thing, and also you might want to look at the fact that r is always positive. Um, Again, when we get to polar coordinates, a negative is going to mean direction. But for this one, if I do a squared, which is the -3, it's not going to matter whether you use the negative or the positive, because when you square, it's always going to become positive. So just be careful in how you enter that onto your calculator as well. Is equal to r squared. If I solve for this, I get that r is the square root of, what, 25 plus 9, 34. Actually, this is very similar to the example that we did last time. Now here, if you wanted to, by the way, I forgot to label, here's the reference angle. And now what you want to do is when you're trying to find the 6 trig function values, we're going to use this theta. But if I want to try to find, for example, cosine of theta, let me put that this is the square root of 34. I know cosine of theta from SOHCAHTOA is what? Adjacent over hypotenuse. And the adjacent is what? On this picture, yeah, this one is the adjacent, this one is the opposite, and this is the hypotenuse. So now the adjacent is going to be -3 over square root of 34. And of course, if you wanted to simplify this, just times the square root of 34 over square root of 34, which we would say it's -3 square root of 34 over 34. So what you want to do is when you're trying to find the trig function values is leave the sign associated with each segment on the right triangle. And again, we're using the acute angle or the reference angle to figure out what cosine of this other angle over here is. So that's where some of you might get confused later on. But once again, it's the same thing for finding the cosine of theta. Now just figure out the other one. Sine of theta, even though theta is over here, we use this right triangle with the reference angle. Sine of theta is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is what? In this case, 5 over square root of 34. So multiply by the square root of 34 over the square root of 34. The main thing is that you understand the signs, whether it's going to be positive or negative, and just base it on the picture or on your picture, however you sketched it out. Tangent is what? And in this picture, opposite is 5, adjacent is -3. So just be careful that you leave a sign associated with each one. Now we look at secant, cosecant, and cotangent. Secant is associated with which one? With cosine. So I'm going to write it right next to it. Secant of theta. You could go to your picture, or you could just, we already found out this one. The unsimplified one is -3 over square root of 34. I would use that one. That way when you do flip it, you know it's going to be square root of 34 over 3. If you flip this simplified one of cosine, you're going to have a radical in the denominator. Then you'd have to just rationalize it in case you wanted the simplified answer. The negative sign, just keep in mind, it doesn't matter. I know that the negative was part of the 3. I put it on top here. Just make sure that it really doesn't matter because sometimes the answers, they write, like for example, if you have -1 over 2, that's the same thing as -1/2, and that's also the same thing as putting the negative on the bottom. The only thing that you cannot do is put the negative on both the top and the bottom, numerator and denominator. Cosecant of theta is what? Hypotenuse over opposite, which in this right here is going to be just square root of 34 over 5. And then cotangent, find the inverse, so it's going to be -3/5.